Father Stephen is the founder and pastor of St. Anne's Orthodox Church in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and writes the very popular blog, Glory to God for All Things. Father Stephen also wrote the book, Everywhere Present, Christianity in a One-Story Universe. So without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy this episode from my interview with Father Stephen Freeman.
The first question you've asked is, how has our culture become so politically charged? And of course, anytime you ask a question about culture, culture is a word for everything. And so it's, you can point to one thing, the media, you can point to, other things, education, but it actually permeates everything. So it's the whole culture has become more political. And we can think about the history of that. I was born in 1953, and so I've lived through a few stages of different things. There were times like in the 1950s when things were very bland and non-political, that maybe needed to be political. In the 1960s, I was 10 in 1963, and lived from then till high school years, watching the civil rights debates. My high school had race riots in 1969 that made national news. So we went through a lot of stages of that. A lot of things picked up nationally in the 1980s with the rise of the moral majority and a sort of a coalescing of movements opposed to abortion, and then the reaction to that. So that's done it. But on a larger level, those are sort of details that have pushed this, that, and the other. And of course, the later sexual politics you could add to the abortion question that have been, these have been wedge issues that have pushed things. But the fact is that the larger culture of modernity did have something of a consensus. Modernity is birthed as an unintended consequence of the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation overthrows the medieval consensus of European civilization that was Catholic and that had predated it. It overthrows that, and with it you get the beginnings of the secularism, the rise of the nation state, and a gradual consensus that becomes sort of the modern consensus. And I would point to something like the 1950s as a great example of almost the height and apex of the modern consensus. That begins to break down. Some people use the word postmodern. I think postmodern is just another part of modern. But as that consensus began to break down, especially as questions like sexual questions, moral questions like abortion and other have pushed in, as the consensus has broken down, the only way to get anything done or to assert anything is by the use of raw power. I've argued before that nobody has to go out and defend gravity. Gravity does a very good job of defending itself. There are a lot of other natural laws, some of which we're ignoring, that aren't as quick in their consequences as gravity. Like you can play games and come up with 50 different gender categories like you can have on Facebook, but you can't point to nature as something that upholds that in a way that the classical divisions pretty well hold up. And so the only way you can do that is to assert them. And the only way you can assert them was with political power combined with legal fiat. And so political power always comes with a price, usually the price of reaction. And we're at a place right now of a political divide of action and reaction on both sides. And you can hardly go anywhere, say anything that doesn't bring a kind of reaction. I mean, just to be on a college campus is almost take your life in your hands, if you speak wrongly or incorrectly. And I think one of the things that happens, that I see this when I'm out, blogging and writing and responding to people's questions, is that most people see all of this stuff as life and death. That like the entire civilization is at stake. And so if, a bishop or a diocese seems to make a step in the wrong direction, someone is certain that they're getting ready to drive the entire church over the cliff, and they react that way, or vice versa, in the opposite direction. And so what I think is important for us, if I kind of think of part two in the question, how do you live with that? As an Orthodox Christian, no matter what time and culture we live in, we know based on the life of the church, the teaching of the fathers, and everything else, that our great struggle is the struggle with the passions. That the passions in our lives are not wrong, but they're distorted. So that there's nothing wrong with hunger. We're supposed to have it. It's a gift from God, but we don't want to eat the right things at the right time and the right amount. And so we fast to try to train and teach ourselves with regard to the passion. Same thing's true in terms of relationships. I mean, sexual drive is God-given, but we don't always want sex with the right person at the right time in the right situation, and so we fast to try to bring that into its proper place. And we have confession for when we don't, and bring, the whole life is struggling with that. In this point in time in our modern culture, and some of this, it began late 19th century and has picked up steam across the 20th, and now is sailing through the air in the 21st, is the ability to market and manipulate the passions. Advertisers do not call it marketing to the passions, but they also don't think of themselves as trying to sell things that people want. If they only sold things that people wanted, the economy would collapse. What they sell is desire. They sell passions. And so you need, at least that's how you experience it, you need the latest iPhone. You need a new car. You need fashions. You need. And it plays off, it's become scientific now. And if you throw artificial intelligence in there, and they are, they're smarter than we are. In other words, if you live passively in this culture, like you just try to live a normal life, or what we think of as a modern normal life, you will be fed your passions. You will think you're thinking, and you're not. You're acting passionately. Years ago, it occurred to me, I was back doing something. It was back when I was not thinking in terms of clergy attire, so it has to be a long time ago. I was in my closet and was trying to pick a tie. And it might have been in the 80s or so, but I was trying to pick a tie. And my closet ties had changed from the wide ties of the 70s to the thinner ties of the 80s. And I remember standing and looking at my closet and the wide ties and thinking to myself, why does this look so bad? It looked awful, as in I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that thing. And why does this new thing look good when 5 years ago I wouldn't have been caught dead wearing that? And it occurred to me that never, ever had it entered my mind to to choose how a tie should look. In other words, that had nothing to do with my will. So the coin dropped, and I realized that my taste in shopping have nothing to do with the will. So we have a culture that tells us that we are about freedom of choice, and that capitalism maximizes the availability of choice, when in fact it doesn't. It markets things to you that you will feel as though you chose them. Now you take that to politics as well. No candidate today in his right mind goes into the field with a political speech that he thinks is what he believes and what he thinks would be good for the country. Every word out of their mouths will have been subjected to market survey. They will know what are your hot button words. They will know what demographic he's speaking to, and he will tailor it. And people in that demographic will respond to those magic words, and there will be a slice of about 10%, 5% either way, that he's actually trying to sway. And because all of our elections are basically somewhere within 55 to 45 on either side, because they're playing with the same little wedge group. This is not about freedom. This is not about decisions. People have not well thought out their civics lessons. They don't really think in terms of democracy. I think it was Mark Twain who said, either he or Will Rogers, that if democracy worked, they wouldn't let us do it.
Hi again. I hope you enjoyed this episode from my interview with Father Stephen Freeman. Please subscribe to get notified when new videos become available, which happens every Friday. And if you would, please comment below to let me know what you thought of this video. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.